Hi, everyone. Welcome back to First Chapter Friday. We are jumping back into fantasy this week with the newest trilogy by Chris DeLacy, and the trilogy is called The Earth Dragons. And we're going to take a look at book one, which is called The Wearle. And for those of you who are familiar with Chris DeLacy, you probably have read his previous fantasy series about dragons called The Last Dragon Chronicles. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Chris DeLacy, you will like his books if you have read and have liked the series called Wings of Fire. They're very similar in tone. So that's our book for this week, and let me tell you just a little bit about it. So the Wearle, which is the title of this first book, refers to a group of dragons who have tried to reclaim the space that their ancestors had on the earth at a previous time period. So their ancestors had kind of moved on and they'd been forced to leave. And so this group of dragons has come back and they're trying to reclaim kind of their old ancestral land. And they're very distrusting of the humans that live around them. They want to protect their tribe, so to speak, and they want to make sure that they can continue to live in this area for a long time. And so they don't trust the humans, and the humans who live close by are called the Call. That's the group of humans that lives nearby, and they don't trust the dragons. They're afraid of them. They think the dragons are evil and that they're trying to destroy the humans' livelihoods. And so there's a lot of distrust that exists between the two groups. And the main focus of the dragon group is a young dragon named Gabriel, and he's called a blue dragon because of his color. And then the main focus from the human group is a young boy called Ren. He's a young teenager. And so this story is about Ren and Gabriel trying to figure out what is going to happen between these two groups, and are both groups really as biased and as distrusting as they seem to be, or is it just something that's been passed down through the generations? Is it something that can be overcome? And so Ren and Gabriel kind of collide in this story in a way that is really exciting, and their belief systems on both sides are going to be challenged, and they're going to see if they really can live together or if one of them is going to have to defeat the other. So this is a really great the newest series by Chris DeLacy. And like I said, if you're a fan of the Wings of Fire series, I think you'll really like this. So today's book is actually an audio book. So we're going to have a professional reading the book for you. It's a lovely British man who's going to be doing the reading. So let me show you where to find the book for those of you who want to continue listening after we preview the first chapter. So let me close this. So as I showed you just a few seconds ago, this is the website you're going to go to. And when it pops up, we've been to this website before several times in the last couple of months. You don't have to log in or anything. What you're going to do is just search for this particular book, which is called The Wearle, Wearle. That's how you spell it. And you're just going to search for it, and it's going to pop up right here. And like I said, this is an audiobook, so it says play instead of read. And so let's click on that. And this is a really great audio version of the book because it actually gives you a whole list of characters. It goes through the pronunciation of all the dragons' names and all the humans' names, and as well as the names of some of the locations that these people are going to be in. So if you're interested, you can certainly listen to the pronunciation of all of those. And we're actually going to start with the prologue. I'm going to play the prologue for you, and then also chapter 1. The prologue is kind of like an introduction to the whole story. It usually gives you some sort of event or a description of something that either happened in present day and then the story flashes back, or in this case, it's something that happened in the past and then the story is set in the present day. So we're going to start with the prologue and we'll play through that in chapter 1. And then if you like the story at that point, you can continue listening on your own. Okay, here we go.
Prologue. In the beginning, was the sleeping dragon, Gudith, and all around her was a void that moved with her gentle breathing. For no reason known, at no time that could be measured, Gudith opened her eyes and poured light into the void. And, liking this, she chose to make an image, a limitless universe in which she might live as many lives as she desired within the bodies of countless dragons. She opened her mouth and brought forth a great flame. Into this flame she spoke a word, Chimera, meaning place of fire and light. And when this was done, Gudith looked upon her image and blinked her eye. And from every sparkle that fell from that jewel came a creature, or a mountain, or an ocean, or a forest. And many of those creatures were also dragons, made in the image of Gudith herself. To each she gave a blessed gift, which was the right to speak the beginning of her name whenever they spoke the beginning of theirs. And so came Gawain, Gareth, and more. And such was the power of her jeweled light that other worlds formed beyond Chimera, some with creatures, some without. But nowhere else did dragons roam, until, as their wisdom and numbers grew, they came to understand that she was in the stars that blinked in the darkness around Chimera, and that the stars were therefore as close to them as she was. Knowing this, they imaged openings in the void, and reached into the darkness to explore every fragment of her creation. Through their fire stars, they traveled to colonize worlds beyond Chimera, and awaken the glory of Gudith across the universe. A journey that in due course brought them to a planet of plentiful water and diverse life forms. When Greffin, prime dragon of the visiting world, commingled with the wisest forms on the planet, using his mind to look into theirs, he discovered that the creatures used the sound Earth to describe their home. In the language of dragons, this meant little more than dirt. Yet even the dirt here was tingling with life. Greffin communicated back to Chimera, describing Earth as an unspoiled breeding ground for dragons. It was the last Chimera ever heard of him, or of the 23 others in his world. This is the story of what happened to those dragons, and the dragons that came in search of them.
Okay, sorry about the barking there. My dogs got a little bit carried away. So now we are going to start chapter 1.
The Wearle, Part 1, Gabriel. Chapter 1. Fold down your wings, Herr Grogan said. He was huddled up, almost in the shape of an egg, his words gruff and hard to hear against the wind. His gnarled old feet, missing the third claw on the left side, were barely visible beneath the curve of his chest. His scales lay taut against his aged sides, flattened down for warmth, less open to the wind. Yawning, he said, It might be nightfall before Christina calls. You need to conserve your energy for battle. You're supposed to be presenting a measure of pride, not hopping about like a giddy weirling. It will not look well if you fall off this mountain before you have the chance to raise your claws against Gavard. I can't settle, said Gabriel, letting the wind lift his wings to their maximum. His underwings, which were the color of blue ice water, glinted in the frost-cooled sun. Across the valley, where the snow-capped mountains were arranged in a wave as blunt and uneven as Père Grogan's teeth, Gavard would be waiting with his second Père Gorst. All that stood between them was a strip of fine cloud and this deep pool of air. Far below, safe in her birthing cave, the matrial dragon, Christina, was curled around her hatching eggs. As soon as they broke, she would call for a guardian to protect her young, a dragon to be her companion for life, a dragon who who would have the right to call himself father. Gabriel was 9 Chimeran turns old, half the age of his powerful opponent. He was also a blue, technically a minor in dragon years, a turn or so away from the first blush of green that would earn him the status of roamer, a dragon free to fly where he chose. But the Wearle had known guardian blues before, most notably Gabriel's father, Garon, who had never quite lost the blue tints on his underwings and had always been classified by that color. When he thought about his father, Gabriel's wings did lower. Garon had been among the first Wearle of dragons to visit this planet, an expedition whose fate was still shrouded in mystery. For some reason, as yet undetermined, contact with them had ended abruptly. On the dragon's homeworld of Chimera, the elders had consulted and decided to send a second, larger party to investigate. Among the 60 who arrived on Earth were mappers, healers, roamers, 3 elders, 2 representatives of the intelligent class of dragons known as De Alice, and an entire wing of fighting dragons called the Veng. The new Wearle immediately colonized a mountain range close to the open sea, just as their predecessors had. 3 phases of the moon had passed, but they had found no trace of the missing dragons. And while the search for them was the highest priority that Gabriel and his companions faced, all other rituals were being observed, including the raising of young. "Oh, your impatience will be your undoing," sighed Grogan. He belched, and a curl of smoke rose from one nostril. "The whole world expects you to lose this contest. If you're happy to prove them right from the outset, then flap away and be done with it." "I'm not intending to lose," said Gabriel, clawing slivers of grey shale loose from the ground on which he was perched. Such was the heat pouring off his body that most of the snow around him had melted, paring back the crisp white surface to its wet grey underbelly. "Why are you here if you believe that I will?" Herr Grogan belched again. "Tradition demands you have a second for a fight like this. Someone has to see to it you don't make a fool of yourself. Rightly or wrongly, I promised your father before he left Chimera with the first Wearle that I would watch over you until your scales turned green. A reckless statement I might yet have cause to regret. What will be the most damaging, I wonder? Following you here, or the prospect of ridicule if this one-sided contest does not go well?" "At least I put myself forward," growled Gabriel, spitting orange-tipped embers around his feet. He watched a pair of roamers set down on a peak due east of him. Once Christina gave her call, this entire ring of mountains would be filled with dragons, keen to observe the battle for her. "And for that you have my respect," said Grogan, tipping his grey head forward a little. "But don't let this brief flirtation with glory puddle your brain. You're only here because the more eligible young dragons know what the outcome would be if they fought Gavard. They applaud you while blowing a snort of relief." Gabriel barreled his chest. "I courted Christina, and she did not reject me. Therefore, I have to fight for her. My father would be proud of me." "Your father was impetuous," Grogan sighed, his scales clattering quietly as the wind got under them. "A quality you seem to have inherited in plenty. But even he would accept it takes more than raw courage to defeat an opponent as powerful as this. Gavard will put your tail in a knot if you try to blaze your way past him. Stick to the tactics we devised and you'll, hopefully, survive with your wings unclipped. An honorable defeat is no shame, believe me. Put up a good display, and the elders might give you a wing to command. Think of it as a training exercise. Practice for the battle you really want to win. Gabriel tightened his eye ridges slightly. What do you mean? Some matches are more appropriate than others, muttered Grogan, looking across the valley for signs of movement. We both know your second heart beats for another. Gabriel gulped and ingested a wisp of smoke, passing it out through the spiracles that lined the sides of his neck. He stared into the open sky as if mesmerized by a drifting cloud. His soft blue eyes, yet to develop their jeweled state, barely moved as he thought about what Grogan had said. 3 females had come to Earth with this Wearle. One was Christina. Another was the aging queen Gossana, a dragon so fearsome even the Veng avoided her. And then there was Grendel, the youngest of the 3, whose primary role was to assist Christina throughout her laying cycle and beyond. Whenever Gabriel thought about Grendel, the scales around his snout turned a deep shade of green. He couldn't hide the change in his coloring now. Without looking at his charge, Herr Grogan said, I have seen the admiration you have for Grendel, and the regard she reserves for you. Really? Gabriel said, slipping forward as his feet danced on the wet rocks. You've spoken to her? She... Before he could go on, a screech wound up from the pit of the valley, clawing at every fissure of rock along its way. That's Christina. She's ready. Prepare yourself, said Grogan. Yes, said Gabriel, snapping to attention. It was true that his second heart ached for Grendel, but his primary heart was in control now, pumping great waves of energy through his body, heating his blood till the veins began to swell. He punched out his wings to steady himself, sending a snow cloud sideways over Grogan. By the time the flakes settled, Herr Grogan had raised himself, and the mountain tops were rumbling to the roars of dragons eager to see a fight. One roar carried above all others. It came from a distant peak directly opposite Gabriel's perch. That's Gavard, Grogan said. He lays claim to Christina and demands you stand down. You must answer him. Gabriel knew this and was ready. For 2 days, since the elders had accepted his challenge, he'd been training his throat to deliver the most powerful response it was capable of. Unlatching the bones at the base of his jaw, he clicked his mouth wide and called up a bellow that drove aside a wide cone of air and colored the world every shade of orange. His fire reached into the valley in a jet, half as long again as his body. There was a little more squeal to it than he would have liked, and Herr Grogan was visibly displeased by the energy wasted in making a sound of such magnitude. But the effect was just what Gabriel had wanted. All around the mountaintops, the air was popping with similar bursts of color. The watching dragons were becoming excited. Perhaps the battle for Christina would not be as one-sided as the odds suggested. Gavard called again, strength and purpose pouring out of his lungs. Oh, now you've angered him, sighed Grogan. That's not a good start, and it won't impress the elders either. He swiveled his eyes towards the peak of the mountain the dragons called Sky Touch, where the silhouettes of the prime dragon, Galahad, and the other 2 elders had appeared. This is not a fight to the death, remember? Produce a flame like that in battle, and Galahad will kill you if Gavard doesn't. All you're aiming to do is take a scale, not turn him to ash. Are you clear about the rules? Gabriel nodded. I can flame and claw, but not stab or bite. Eyes and hearts must always be avoided. Good. What else? No phasing. None whatsoever, said Grogan. Any movements through time, no matter how minor, will be seen as cheating. You'll be back in Chimera before you can scrape your last meal off your teeth if Galahad detects a change in the continuum. What else? A second call went up from Christina, the final call to battle. The assembled dragons burned the air in acknowledgement. All along the skyline now, more were arriving, like a flock of giant birds. Gavard threw out another fierce roar. What else? Herr Grogan repeated harshly, lashing his tail across Gabriel's chest to prevent the young dragon from launching too soon. Gabriel roiled his wings in frustration. Only one image. Herr Grogan nodded. One. Don't waste it. He pulled his tail away, and Gabriel launched. Stay low, the old dragon bellowed, adding to himself, the less far you have to fall, the easier it will be to stand up tomorrow. And then he took to the rock that Gabriel had vacated and bellowed to Per Gorst that his charge was in the air. Likewise, Per Gorst let it be known that Gavard had launched. 2 dragons, 1 theatre of air. The battle for Christina had begun.
Okay, that's the end of chapter 1. So if you're interested in listening to more about this fantastic dragon adventure, remember this is where you can go to listen to the rest of the story. This particular website right here, and I will also have that posted on my library website, so you can always click on it directly from there. All right, thanks so much for listening this week, you guys, and I'll see you back next week for another First Chapter Friday. Have a good one.